Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from the 16th chapter in the book of Revelation. We covered the first 5 plagues all the way up till the 11th verse. We're going to take it from the 12th all the way to the 21st, so we're going to be dividing it in half that way. Even though there's only 2 plagues, they consume a greater chunk of the chapter. And what we did in the we're going to review the 5 plagues that came before it before we do anything. Verse 2, "And the first went and poured out his bowl upon the earth, and an evil and wicked sore came upon the men, these having the mark of the beast, and those worshipping the image." So there's 7 angels of whom we meet in the opening verse of the preceding chapter, and then they appear again in the 6th verse of the same chapter, the 15th chapter, but we don't read of their judgments until now. In the first one, they all have vials which contain the wrath of Elohim, and these are judgments. So these angels aren't interceding; these are angels of judgment. And the plague that he sends is the evil and wicked sores. This reflects the 6th plague of Egypt, but it can also be interpreted as a nuclear fallout. Wicked sores can come from nuclear exchange, and the ones who are targeted are those who succumb to the beast in his one world system. They bear the mark and they worship his image, and they are not spared of this plague. The next one comes in verse 3, "And the second angel poured out his bowl on the sea, and it became blood, as of a dead one, and every living creature in the sea died." This is the first plague of Egypt, when Moses raised his staff and the Nile became blood. And but this is the sea, so this is the ocean. The next one, the third messenger poured out his bowl on the rivers and the fountains of water, and they became blood. So the first one targets the oceans, the life and everything in it. The second one targets the fresh waters, the lights, the rivers and the fountains of water. Then in the 8th verse, we read of there's just a little doxology that the one of the angels sings, an angel on the waters, which is targeted by the third one, a doxology in the midst of tribulation. So if we are not praising God through the tribulation, we're not going to make it, should the tribulation fall on us. But in the 8th verse, we read of the 4th messenger who poured out his bowl on the sun, and it was given him to burn men with fire. And one of the things, they blasphemed having received the fire, and that's going to come into play in the 21st and final verse of the lesson of the range we'll be covering today. And then the 5th one poured out his bowl on the throne of the beast. The beast is the anti-Messiah, and his reign became darkened. Now Satan's kingdom is one of darkness, which is analogous to sin, ignorance, and secrets. But it's going to be literal darkness, like one of the plagues of Egypt, the 9th, I believe. And so these all have precedent in the 8th chapter. They're all different phenomenons, different plagues and judgments, but the first plague of in 8:7, this is the second round of 7 plagues, was targeted towards the earth. The second one of 8:8 was targeted towards the sea. The third one in verse 10 was targeted towards the fresh water, the rivers and the reservoirs and things that were not salt water. And the verse 12, the 4th one is the sun, moon, and stars. It's actually in this one, but the sun is the catalyst in the 8th chapter, whereas in the 16th chapter it is really only the sun. And the darkness plague, the 10th one goes on the throne of the beast, and that is, and really the 9th chapter is which describes the 5th plague, is stars walking to earth in darkness. So the plague is paralleled from the fifth to the fifth, if not the direction of the target. And then what we want to do before we move on to the lesson itself is just review the 6th and 7th plagues of the predecessors, which come after the 8th chapter. So we got to go back there. We did this with the antecedent lesson from the same chapter. We're going to briefly read the 6th, which takes place in verses 9, 13 through 15. And they had breastplates like... And the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before Elohim, saying to the 6th angel who had the trumpet, Release the 4 messengers, those having been bound at the great river Euphrates, and the 4 messenger angels, those having been prepared for the hour, when the day and the month and the year were released to kill a third of mankind. So this forms the same location as the 6th one in the chapter we're going to be reading today, the Euphrates. And here it's a third of the genocide. Here, in the chapter we're going to be covering, the Euphrates River is dried up, enabling the Iranians, we feel, is the most plausible army to cross over and just assault and attack them. Then there's another key verse in 10:7. But in the days of the sounding of the 7th angel, when he is about to sound, the secret of Elohim shall also be ended, as he declared to his servants, the prophets. So this is the ending of this cycle of judgments, but we read much similar language, the finality. He says it is done in one point in the passage we're going to be covering. And this alludes to the 7th plague, of which we read of more fully in the 11th chapter, verses 15 through 19. And the 7th angel sounded, and there came to be loud voices in the heavens, saying, The kingdom of this world has become that of our Master and of his Messiah, and he shall reign forever and ever. And the 24 elders sitting before Elohim on their thrones fell on their face and worshipped Elohim. Actually, I was the 15th and the 19th verse. We're going to briefly comment on the 15th verse. This is the 7th angel. This is the final one, and he speaks with a loud thundering voice that the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. What do we read in the Lord's Prayer? On earth as it is in heaven, thy kingdom come. We witness that in that order. And this, the way that this is arranged, the kingdom of the world belongs to the king. When the king comes, his kingdom comes with him. So when he returns with sword in hand, when he came as the Lamb, his kingdom was not of the earth, it was in heaven. But there will be the millennial dispensation where he does rule for 1,000 years on the earth. And of course, he will reign eternally in heaven after that. Now we're going to turn to the lesson itself, chapter 16, verse 12. And the 6th angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up in order to prepare the way for the kings of the east. So the Euphrates was the northeastern boundary of the land that had been originally promised to Abraham. The Israelite nation has never occupied the totality of that promised land in their history, but it was also the eastern boundary of the Roman Empire. And the drying up ensured the passage of armies. We witnessed this in the Roman Empire when the River Danube, which was the northern extremity separating the Roman Empire from the Germanic barbarians, it froze over in the year 406, and by 410 Rome had been sacked for the first 800 years because the river was the thing that was keeping them away from running over and into the Roman Empire. And of course, most of the conscripted soldiers in the Roman Empire were of barbarian stock in the later phases of the empire. But the armies from the east. A lot of people picture this as China and India, and they could be correct, but Iran is the most threatening one, who is to the east of the Euphrates in relation to Israel. They want it off the map. They refer to it as a stinking corpse. They are offended by the fact that it is allowed to exist, even though it occupies only 0.4 of a single percentage point of the collective lands that comprise the lands which constitute the Arabic and Islamic nations. And I know Iran's not an Arabic nation, they're Islamic, but that figure is representative of the Arabic people and lands, and the Iranians hate them just as much. So that little 0.4% of land is too much when hating Jews are the center of your life. But and I saw out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophets, 3 unclean spirits as frogs. So these are the people we met, the satanic trinity. Satan operates. He doesn't quite exist in Trinity, but he does operate in the same, and these satanically endowed men who are, it's not quite clear whether they are born of a woman, but they are clearly endowed with satanic supernaturalism. They perform miracles through demonic occult practices, and but we meet of them in the 12th, the satanic trinity. We meet of the dragon in the 12th chapter, who wages his persecution against the church after being defeated in heaven. So as Satan, he has access to the heavenly throne room, but he is cast down after a losing battle with Michael the archangel. And this is what begins the tribulation, because he's no longer in heaven. He's exclusively on earth, working his magic through 2 principal human puppets, the 2 beasts of whom we read of in the 13th chapter, the first of which is the beast, the anti-Messiah, the global end-time dictator, and the lowercase beast, the false prophet, who, so in their division of labor, Satan, whose crowns come on his head, indicates that he is the brains of the operation. But when the first beast is described in Revelation 13, his crowns, his 10 crowns, are on his horns, and horns are the symbol of might. So in the division of labor, the dragon is the minds of the operation, the beast is the anti-Messiah is the muscle of the operation, and the false prophet is the mouth of the operation, and they work in trinity and tandem. And but out of their mouth comes unclean spirits, alternately translated as demonic. But frogs were they were the second plague of Egypt, and they were likened to evil in several ancient Near Eastern cultures. They were considered unclean by the Mosaic standards, but they were also likened to evil in the other ancient Near East cultures, and that's perhaps why the Pharaoh's magicians were able to duplicate the plague of frogs, because they had access to evil. But Yahweh in his sovereignty uses evil to protect, uses evil against evil people to protect the innocent and righteous and chosen and elect. And they are spirits of demons doing signs, which go out to the kings of the entire world to gather them for the battle of the great day of Yahweh El Shaddai. So demons are the adversary's minions. They are fallen angels disembodied as a consequence not of their following Lucifer, but in the 6th chapter of Genesis, in the first 2 verses, we read that demons were sexually mingling with human beings, and that's what's turned their hearts to where the imaginations of their hearts were only evil and continually Genesis 6:5. but they've been disembodied and they torture and possess people, and demon possession is a fact of life in any age. There are dozens of demon-possessed peoples running around taking their demonically induced problems with them, but the spirits of demons are capable of producing miracles, and there is some schools of thought that says they're just mirages. Some say miracles. I personally think they are capable of manipulating matter, but their motive is only for the sake of publicity, and it's to get the unbelieving world to believe that the answer to the prayers they didn't even know they had is found in his beast, who is able to perform these miracles, and his prophet, and all the kings of the world. It's going to be a one world government, but the great battle is the day of Yahweh El Shaddai. El Shaddai translates as El Almighty, so he is the great day of an omnipotent one. Will not end well for the wicked, but the righteous will rejoice in that day. See, I am coming as a thief. Blessed is he who is staying awake and guarding his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. So the warning to look is the suddenness of the event, and it hasn't happened yet, but it could happen at any moment. Just like a thief in the night, is he going to return, and the tribulation must come to pass first. That's also going to come in the thief of a night, and the suddenness of the event demands preparation, which are represented by the clothes, the linens and stuff, wedding feast. This reminds us of the New Testament parable where the wedding feast, who was invited, forgot his wedding clothes, and he was cast into hell for not being clothed in the garments of righteousness that come from our marriage to the bridegroom. We, the church, are the bride. He is the bridegroom. And but this also, the call to look was represented in the third chapter. He writes of the seven assemblies he writes, one of them is lifeless Sardis, and in the second verse of that chapter, he tells them to wake up, and the proper clothing and attire is appropriate for the lukewarm Laodicea, who he admonishes to be clothed more correctly in the 18th verse of the third chapter. Verse 16, this is where we learn of Armageddon. And they gathered them together to the place called in Hebrew Armageddon. Now the Hebrew translation of Armageddon, it is the hill of Megiddo. Harma is their word for hill, and Megiddo is the city, and one of the three cities that was fortified by the King Solomon along the pass. So it is a place of troops and slaughters. It is alternately known as the Valley of Jezreel. It is 14 miles wide, 20 miles long. It is the largest pass through the Carmel Range, which guards the Valley of Jezreel. So this is a city, this is a place of, and Megiddo, the city, is situated on Via Maris, which is the highway between Egypt and Mesopotamia. So this is a strategic, commercial, and military standpoint. It is the site of many battles, and it's the only battle that's going to be fought there is not going to be the one at the end of the world, but it was the place where King Saul, for example, died. Pharaoh Necho killed King Josiah, one of the great reformers, in 2 Kings 23:39, while Necho was en route to battle the Assyrians, whom he would ultimately be defeated and swallowed whole by in the year 598. So Jerusalem came not long after. But the most brilliant military tactician in the modern world, at least, Napoleon, described it as nothing less than the most natural battlefield on Earth. And because it is so natural, it is supernaturally and providentially ordained to be the final place of the final battle of the world. And Israel's going to have to fend off Iran, if not China, and India, and perhaps Russia, although that battle takes place slightly before Armageddon, the one we read of in Ezekiel 38:39, which is yet to come to pass. And the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came from the temple of the heavens, from the throne, saying, "It is done." So this vial is poured out on the air, and in the seventh one, the kingdom, he descends from the air to the earth. He condescends, and there's also an earthquake in the 15th one, the 11:15, the earlier version of the seventh plague we covered. But we're just going to break it down from verse 17 in here. Loud thunderous voice from the temple of the heavens, from the throne. That can only mean this is the voice of Elohim, and he's expressing the finality with the same words that the Son used when he expired on the cross. It is finished, he read, and he is recorded as stating in John 19:13. So once the seventh angel comes, that's it. These plagues, these judgments are set. And it is done, and that means there's nothing more to do. And there came to be noises and thunders and lightnings, and there came to be a great earthquake, such as mighty and great earthquake, as has not come to be since men were on the earth. So this is also defined by an earthquake, as is the seventh plague, the earlier seventh plague, where the ones where this angel signalized the plagues through the trumpets. Here they're doing them through the vials. And this earthquake is going to be exceedingly grander than the one which came before it. And there's a few, the earthquake which destroys, I think, 1/10 of the city of Jerusalem. But this is going to be a monumental one. No one's ever going to see anything like it before or after. It is unprecedented and unduplicated. It is record-shattering and earth-shattering, the extent of this earthquake. And the great city became divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nation fell. And great Babylon was remembered before Elohim, to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. So this earthquake and everything that comes after it is going to divide and destroy Babylon, in whom it will produce the memory that they had defied, resisted, and rebelled against Elohim, because they're going to recognize that it had been sent by him. And all the great cities of the nations fell. Now, strictly speaking, there are going to be no nations. There's going to be one nation, a global world government. Independent sovereignties will cease to exist, but they will all be likened symbolically to Babylon, if not exactly called that. And and they had experienced the wine of his wrath, and we read of this concept earlier in other chapters. But the wine of his wrath are the things that are poured from the vial. So the wine can mean all sorts of things, and we don't really have time to get into it because we got 2 more verses. So, and every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. So the islands and mountains disappear as a direct result of this earthquake, which divides and destroys not only Babylon, but every island is moved by the monumental shift of this earthquake, and all the mountains are nowhere to be seen. They once dominated the skyline, but they're no more, and that is how profound and earth-shattering this earthquake will be. 21st and final verse. And great hail from the heavens fell upon men, every hailstone about the weight of a talent. And men blasphemed Elohim for the plague of the hail, because that plague was exceedingly great. So the size of this hail is a talon. It usually weighs anywhere between 75 pounds and 130 pounds. And a talon consists of 6,000 denaries. And I forget the monetary scale, but the important thing is the weight. So these are monumental balls of hail. With any skull cracked by that has no chance to survive. And the plague will be exceedingly great. This will fall upon men, the men of Babylon, and no one who is hit by one can survive. And they're going to know that the plague was sent to them by Elohim, who they're going to blaspheme, much as those who did the fourth and fifth plague, of which you read in the earlier chapter. So let's review that. That's verses 9 and 11. And the men were burned with great heat, and they blasphemed the name of Yahweh, who possessed authority over these plagues, and they did not repent and give him esteem. So not only did they blaspheme, but they refused to repent. They had not received the message that was sent to him. Plagues and disappointments and tragedies, you think they're accidents, but it's actually mostly God trying to speak to you, and he does speak to us through his pain. But these people are stubborn-hearted mules who resist and resent the call and urgency to repent, because they'd rather go their own way, do their own thing, be their own masters, be their own gods, and they will repent. They will not repent before, and they will in fact blaspheme the one, the true, the only, and the living God. And in verse 11, in the fifth plague, and they blasphemed the Elohim of the heavens for their pains and their sores, and they did not repent of their works. So all they could think about were the sores that were over them, covering them, consuming them. And because they took it personally, they did not praise or ask for healing from the one who had sent them, but they cursed him to his face. And to blaspheme entails serious consequences for one's eternal standing. So the final moral of I don't know what the moral lesson of the story is. I guess just be prepared, be watchful, be mindful, and don't blaspheme. The secondary lesson. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. So glad to see you. Take care until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.